Discussion of the City of Emeryville personnel rules and procedures. Mr. Biddle.
Well, this item is really being presented at the request of Councilmember Bukowski, and your staff has provided to you copies of provisions of the municipal code governing a civil service system that was initially adopted by the voters in the 1930s. And so for many years, the hiring and termination of city employees as well as disciplinary matters were handled in accordance with these provisions in the civil service system, which essentially those matters came before the city council. And so certainly you see in some old council resolutions where the council is hiring and terminating employees. In 1984, the city council adopted Ordinance 8401, which established the office of the city manager and the council manager form of government for the city of Emeryville. And the powers vested in the office of the city manager include the power of authority over an appointment and removal of all department heads and employees of the city. The civil service system, as I mentioned, vested that authority with the council as to positions in what were deemed to be the classified service, which were employees in the police and fire department, excluding the police and fire chief, the street department, excluding the city engineer and street superintendent, the deputy tax collector, the stenographer, telephone operator, and the janitor. And in April of '85, the council at that time adopted Ordinance 8503, which purported to repeal and replace the civil service system provisions in the municipal code. And the provisions of Ordinance 8503, for the most part, did mirror the civil service system, except that it placed the power of authority over an appointment and removal of employees with the city manager in order to be consistent with the creation of the office of the city manager. Yet, as I noted earlier, the civil service system was created by a vote of the people, and thus Ordinance 8503, which was passed by the council back in 1985, was not legally effective. And I believe Councilmember Bukowski indicated a recollection of some litigation that was brought by one or more of the employee groups over that passage of that ordinance. Nevertheless, what is clear in accordance with the Myers-Milius-Brown Act, the council did adopt the Employer-Employee Organization Relations Resolution in 1986, which governs the procedures for administering employment relations with the city's employee organizations, that being SEIU Local 790, the Emeryville Police Officers Association, and IAFF Local 55. In the statement of purpose of the Employer-Employee Resolution, it includes that nothing herein shall be deemed to supersede provisions of state law, city ordinances, resolutions, and rules which establish and regulate the civil service and merit system, or which provide for other means of administering employer-employee relations. Thus, as is expressed in the resolution that was adopted in 1986, the City Council continues to recognize the existence of the civil service system and to instead choose to be the employees, rather, instead choose to be represented by employee organizations that have been formally recognized by the city. And then the terms and conditions of their employment are set forth in the MOUs that have been bargained between the city and the unions. Also, the employees are subject to the personnel rules that the city has met and conferred with the unions over, in which the MOUs recognize. And thus, while the civil service system is still on the books, it really has no practical effect, since all the employees that would be subject to its provisions are instead governed by the provisions in their respective MOUs and the personnel rules. And so we are in the process at present of meeting and conferring with the employee organizations over revisions to the personnel rules. And certainly, if the council wants to weigh in on that at this point, you can certainly do so. Obviously, the resolution approving the revised personnel rules will eventually come to the City Council for consideration. At this point, if the council is desirous of revising the city manager ordinance to involve itself in personnel decisions regarding city employees, as has been suggested by Councilmember Bukowski, there is no limitation on the authority to do that. It would, however, require obviously revisions to the city manager ordinance, and then likewise it would require negotiating revisions to the MOUs with the various employee organizations, because at present it does not recognize, those MOUs do not recognize any authority of the council to hire and fire them individually.
Councilmember Bukowski.
Well, my first comment is that if the civil service system was adopted by a vote of the people, the council doesn't have the authority to supersede that with any adopted resolution. And the other question would be the unrepresented employees that are not covered by bargaining agreements. They would be left out, right? Because they would be covered by the civil service provisions, but not covered by the MOUs.
They are not covered by the civil service system. They are not covered by the MOUs, but they are covered by the personnel rules. Certain department or employees are, but most department heads are not even governed by the personnel rules. They are at will.
I mean, the one change that I would purport to make here would be in the grievance procedure.
Wait, before you do that, could we get the answer to your first question? You just sort of responded to the second, but
I didn't.
The
And
question
what was his
was
first
the-
question?
Was how can the council adopt a resolution when the voters approved one thing and the council's going a different direction?
Well, the civil service system was adopted by the voters really to provide protection to the employees from any sort of just random employment decisions that may have been handed down by the then city council, or whether it was a strong mayor form of government, I'm not certain. Subsequently, the Myers-Milius-Brown Act was enacted by the state legislature, which applies across the board to all public employment, and it provides a process by which employees can choose to be represented through an organized body, such as the unions that we now negotiate on behalf of the city as it relates to miscellaneous employees and police and fire. So the employees themselves, they could easily say, no, we want to stay within the civil service system, or we can choose to be represented by by the various labor organizations, and obviously they've chosen to at present be represented by the labor organizations. They could later at some time in the future say, you know what, we want to abandon that, and then perhaps the civil service system would come back into real practical effect. But that's not the case right now.
It seems to me that should be cleaned up, Bill. I mean, I don't think it should be left the way it is.
Well, I can't clean up a voter-approved measure other than just putting on the ballot to repeal it, which I think, I don't think it's something that really needs to be done or taken on, because, as I say, presently the employees are in fact represented through their labor organizations, and I think they would like to keep that civil service system in place as a backdrop in case something changes. So
What was the date of that vote of the people?
it was in the 1930s. I don't have the exact date, but I know it was the early 30s.
They're trying to probably get protection from rapacious politicians.
Yeah.
so Mike, then, Ken, if I can stay with this a second, though. So what, I guess part of what Ken was asking, I wasn't sure what your answer was. So that's fine for those employees who are in, covered by the collective bargaining agreements. What about the employees that aren't, or what's their status vis-à-vis this civil service thing?
Well, the other employees that are outside it are pretty much everybody who's sitting in this room, and other department heads or supervisory employees. They're unrepresented. They aren't governed by, I shouldn't say all of them, but they're not governed by the personnel rules either. They're at will.
But how that doesn't fly in the face of this old civil service
No,
thing?
because they weren't, none of these positions were called classified. You had to be in the classified service to be in the ambit of the
Okay.
civil service system.
So no department head was covered by the civil service system?
No.
Can I suggest, Ken, that we understand that staff is working on a cleanup and revision of this whole,
Well, we are meeting and conferring at present with SEIU Local 790 and the EPOA on some revisions to the personnel rules. Apparently, the representatives of Local 55 chose not to participate, and for whatever reason. So
who chose not to participate?
the firefighters union.
The firefighters chose not to participate?
Not
What is it with you guys?
I can-
The union, I'm not
It's the
sure
union.
why.
Oh, okay, okay.
You know, I can wait till those revisions come to
Well,
the council.
that's my suggestion, Ken, that we wait till you go through this process, bring it back to the council, and then at that time, we can have your discussion.
But I think it's important that Ken got answered. The main question he had is, were we doing something wrong in view of this civil service thing that got passed by the voters a long time ago? And it's clear that we're not, so that's good.
Okay, moving along to